Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to follow up on my earlier video analyzing the recent criminal charges against Donald Trump and how I feel about it. Um, but I do realize a couple of things. I mean, number one, I have to justify why that's related to my Cluster B channel. I mean, here I talk about personality disorders, so justification. Okay, first of all, I personally think that personality disorders have to do with dysfunction in our dialectical processing. Okay. And I think one of the best ways to look at dialectical processing is to look at the temperature of politics. Okay, because I think politics are probably an area where we see, in big display, the level of dialectical processing in the public. Okay, and in the culture. So I see a big connection because I think basically what happens with people with cluster B is that we have deficiencies in our dialectical processing that are, at least you can make an analogy to what we see in politics. Okay. Basically, for me, dialectical processing is when a person allows a lot of kind of incommensurate, sort of irreconcilable information, considerations, issues to just sort of sit without disposing quickly of those issues so that we can organically process just the panorama of sort of irreconcilable, sort of incompatible ideas. Most of the time, our habit when we see incompatible ideas, we like to quickly dispose the question and just go with whatever seems like the most obvious or the most convenient or the least uncomfortable idea. It's much harder for a person to just kind of sit with things on the table where you have sort of like different irreconcilable, kind of incommensurate, ideas, considerations, issues. And it is kind of uncomfortable. But I think when we allow those things just kind of sit together, sometimes, well, I say naturally, we just sort of develop sort of like a metabolic processing, and those things synthesize over time because we're not quickly disposing, and that I think that develops a lot of richness in our soul, and I think that is exactly what's missing with personality disorders. When someone is narcissistic, they have these quick ideas that they're so great and that other people are so inferior and all that. But what's really happening is that we're not really honestly putting on the table all the real considerations of who I am, who other people are. What is there? It's ways of not dealing with the kind of the murkiness and the stress of just dealing with all of life's issues. Like, should why doesn't it occur to a narcissistic person to think, well, maybe I'm not being patient enough with people, maybe I'm not being considerate enough of the realities and the value of other people, maybe I'm overestimating, and these are just, in the end, I mean, the question is always, we're smart enough, and why don't we just put more questions on the table about my status, the status of other people, and maybe tolerate the stress of putting more burden on ourselves. What could we be doing better? You know. Um, anyway, bottom line is, so I see the dialectical problem internally in personality disorders, and I think it's important very much to. I think it's very important to sort of see the connection with what's happening in politics. Okay, so that's the reason why I wanted to talk about the Donald Trump situation, because I think there's a dialectical story about why the Democrats are essentially they're approving wholeheartedly this new version of a political campaign against Donald Trump, which is through criminal charges. Okay, but on the other hand, anybody could fairly ask me, and this is a dialectical question, so therefore, what are you going to say? You're going to say it wasn't criminal what happened on January 6th. You're going to say January 6th wasn't criminal, basically attacking the US Capitol, you know? And that, I think, is a fair question, because I think for anybody who wasn't, let's say, a president, if it was just Roger Stone and Steve Bannon, let's say, okay, somebody who wasn't sitting in the office of the president, you know, would it be fair to say that they would probably be indicted for basically inciting an insurrection or inciting an attack, like an assault on a U.S. installation? Like, say, let's take it a little differently. Let's say that Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and Corey Lewandowski and all those bozos, let's say that they had organized a takeover of like the mayor's office in some city. Let's say Memphis, Tennessee, or whatever, Atlanta, Georgia. And so they got all these people together and they organized a takeover, let's say, of like literally City Hall, or like a federal courthouse or something like that. I think there's no question they would be indicted, and properly so. So how can I explain why I still feel that you know, how can I say that I still feel that the criminal charges against Donald Trump are basically kind of a Brazilian Peruvian style, using criminal charges as a way of doing politics? Is that really fair of me? And I have to say, maybe I should really have to defend my position, and maybe my position also is a little oversimplified. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you right away. I don't want to waste your time. Okay, I still think it is political. Okay, what we're doing with Donald Trump. And even though I think another person would rightly be prosecuted for what Donald Trump did, I do think there's something different about when you're prosecuting presidents. Okay, I think we have to be very careful what it would mean to be using criminal prosecution as a way of dealing with presidents. Okay, so I guess I don't know. I mean, and I know that's a difficult thing to say. Like probably there's room for debate. That's my position, just because I think presidents are like a different category. And I think when you start, criminally prosecuting presidents, there's a lot of economic and kind of administrative issues that come in. Because first of all, a president can't really go to jail. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate to break it to everybody. A president cannot go to jail. Okay, so let's just be very careful about what we're talking about. So, and the reason I say that, because I work in criminal defense. I work in federal criminal defense. Okay, I work with lawyers. I am a trained lawyer, and I work on the side of legal research, and I work on litigation strategy in federal criminal court. I mean, I work in civil and criminal, but I work in litigation basically. So I mean, I'm involved in lots of federal criminal litigation. Okay, and so I understand sentencing pretty well. I mean, I do a lot of sentencing briefs. I do a lot of sentencing appeals. I do a lot of negotiation. I'm sort of behind the scenes, but I work with negotiating settlements in federal criminal cases. I've helped get people out of jail because they had medical problems and they had to continue their incarceration at home. And so I understand a little bit about how the elderly. I've done a lot of elderly cases where the question of prison or jail time for elderly people. And so I can just tell you right now that a president would never do any jail time, or would do no prison time. It doesn't matter what they're convicted of. They could be convicted of murder, and they're going to do their prison time. If they ever got there, they would do it at home. Okay, so there's no prison for Donald Trump or for any president. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So we just have to. I think we just have to realize that criminal prosecution against a president is a completely different story than a normal person. Even Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon can go to prison. Roger Stone, he can go to prison, but Donald Trump can't go to prison. Okay, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So I guess I can quickly say why. I mean, the thing is that by law, a president has a lot of secrets. Okay, a president has a lot of secret information. Just in Donald Trump's brain, he has a lot of very secret information. He can't just be out, how do you say, unprotected. Okay, he's a sensitive. He has a lot of sensitive information, and also by law, a president cannot go anywhere without basically Secret Service. Okay, so there's no real logistical way for him to go into a prison or a corrections facility. There's just no way for it to happen. So basically, because of those special considerations, if Donald Trump ever really did, become subject to an actual prison sentence, okay, he'd have to do it at home. Okay, and he'd have to have his Secret Service taking care of him. So it would be probably what would end up happening is the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, would probably organize they would have to organize kind of a collaboration between the Secret Service and the U.S. Marshals and BOP, administration, and they'd have to design some kind of home arrangement where he'd basically be at home, and probably even allowed to do some things away from home. It's amazing how they organize these things. But he'd basically be under supervised custody of the Bureau of Prisons through the U.S. Marshals and the Secret Service. So basically, it's not that much different. If you really think about it, a former president is already in custody because Donald Trump cannot legally be by himself. He cannot. And I mean, or no president, no ex-president. So like say George W. Bush or like Jimmy Carter or any ex-president, they can't be alone. They can't drive alone legally. They cannot drive by themselves. They can't even really, I don't think they can even, I mean, they could drive, but they could drive like in a driveway, or they could drive like on their own private property, but they can't drive in public roads. Okay, they have to be driven by a security detail. Okay, so if you really think about it, a former president is already in custody for the rest of their lives. Really, I mean, it is a kind of a home arrest if you think about it. They can't go like George W. Bush. He can't say, I want to go by myself to the grocery store. Legally, he's not allowed to. Okay. So just understand that, if you really think about it, a former president is already in custody for the rest of their lives. And so when you put the legal considerations of the security of a former president against what it would mean to be, let's say on home detention or home imprisonment, it's basically the same thing. So, I just hate to break it to anybody, and I'm really sorry. I feel terrible because we have all these smart people, all these smart lawyers that go and pontificate. They're like these pundits on all these political shows and stuff, and they talk about, well, could Donald Trump go to prison? Well, it's like the pros and the cons. It's like, just break it to people. Okay. I mean, and these are smart people. You got some smart attorneys. They know what I know, but they pretend like it's an open issue because it makes more money for the talk shows and for the news shows, but really there is no conversation to be had about this. I mean, legally, a former president just cannot go to prison. Okay, that's it. They're already in prison. Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, talk to George W. Bush. He's been in prison since he left the White House because they're not allowed to be free. So in any case, I just want to say that there's a reason why I'm talking about these political things, because I would like to try to link the dialectical breakdown in American politics is exactly similar. Well, let's say it's very similar, not exact, but it's pretty similar to the dialectical absence that is, I think, at the heart of personality disorders. So that's my justification for talking about this Donald Trump stuff. And I think Donald Trump's an important case. I'm never going to talk about whether I think he has a personality disorder. Okay. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is I don't know how to say it. Like, could it be true that Donald Trump has some cluster B pathology, let's say, some cluster B characteristics? Well, yeah, like a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people live on the spectrum, with some cluster B issues. Could it be that Donald Trump doesn't have the most developed dialectical processing? Probably. But do I think that Donald Trump has a mental condition, a diagnosable personality disorder? I don't think so. Okay, and I mean, I'm sad to say that because I don't like him. And I don't think he's a nice person, and I don't think he's a good leader, and I don't have any deep respect for him. Even though I do agree he has some good ideas, But I don't think he's a mentally, well, I don't even think that people with NPD are necessarily mentally ill. I think it's a mental condition, but I just don't think Donald Trump is diagnosable. I don't think so. I think he's just a jerk. But and also too, like, I mean, he could, if he wanted to, he could improve his dialectical functioning. Okay. So a person like him, if they wanted to, they could have therapy and they could improve their lives. But I just think that, NPD is a diagnosable condition. I think that that's carved into a different extreme, really, because it is like at the bottom, like let's say 2 to 4% of the population, people who are severely messed up in the way they're processing, the way they're formulating their picture of the world, themselves with the world, and it's a little deeper. And maybe Donald Trump is maybe in the neighborhood of having a personality disorder, but and of course he's had a lot of dysfunction in his life. I mean, he's had terrible relationships. His marriages are probably unspeakably bad. And so he's not far. I don't think he's far from having a personality disorder. But I think in general, I think Donald Trump is a little too functional. Um, and I mean, like, I didn't even think honestly that Meghan Markle is diagnosable. Okay, because she's also pretty functional. I mean, and granted, they say she's very lazy. They say she's, really just a flake and all that. She's not very good with friendships, but she still functions at a pretty sophisticated level. Okay, and I think people that have true personality disorders now, they're not that functional, I don't think. And this is where I take issue. I think a lot of people, a lot of high dollar kind of fancy therapists, they talk about, well, what about the Wall Street NPDs? I've got patients that are very successful in finance, and I don't know, like, I think we need to ask ourselves, let's say mental health itself, we need to ask ourselves who we want to define as having these personality disorders. If somebody is very, very successful professionally and they are at the same time, just an insufferable narcissist, like, say they're just like, just terrible attitudes, terrible treatment of other people. I think we need to be very careful where we draw the line and say this is diagnosable. I mean, diagnosable as a mental condition. Okay. I think there always has to be an analysis of how functional a person is. So when we talk about, well, I'm a high functioning borderline, I'm a high functioning, I think that's a fancy way of saying I'm not really mentally ill, but I have issues. And I guess I'm sort of in the school where I don't want to see a world where we talk about like the high functioning this and the high functioning that. I think to really qualify for truly a mental condition that deserves to be diagnosable, I think the high functioning is probably should not be really part of that. I think we need to be willing to see that there are people that are not diagnosable, who are not really clinically, on that clinical diagnosable scale, and yet they still have personal issues that are in the same spectrum, and they deserve to go get therapy and improve their lives. But I think the diagnosis, I think, should be reserved for people who effectively, really, they cannot manage their lives, okay, in any real meaningful way. So it's kind of like, they talk about like the social alcoholic. Well, he doesn't lose his job, still maintains the family, blah blah blah. I think real alcoholism should be for people who their lives are really unlivable. And I think, I don't know, that's my attitude. So I'm not going to talk about Donald Trump as being, having a mental condition, even though that people may disagree. I mean, but I still think you see around Donald Trump, you see the dialectical issues. Okay. Um, and you also see the dialectical issues around how the public reacts to Donald Trump. Okay. And how politics is changing around Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? So I guess my position is, I can see Donald Trump definitely has maturity issues. He has personality issues, but I just don't know if I want to go so far as to say it's NPD. Okay, I just don't want to do that. Um, but I do think that the big circus around Donald Trump is saying a lot about us as a people. And I think that is relevant, not directly to personality disorders, not directly, but in the sense that it has to do with the dialectical processing in public. And I think that's very relevant for those of us who have had real personality disorders, where our lives were really, truly, basically unlivable and dysfunctional, not high functioning. You know what I mean? So that's the reason why I'm talking about Donald Trump and this politics stuff, and why I will talk about, let's say, some criminal cases where we see people that are brought out of their closet. People like Rex Heuermann, for example. People, psychopaths, whatever, because it's all kind of the same thing. Even though psychopaths are a little different from narcissists, who are a little different from borderlines. I think in all cases we're dealing with some real, diminished capacity in the area of dialectical processing, and I think it's very healthy to bring that on the table and talk about it. So that's why I'm going to be talking about a little bit about politics and sometimes true crime and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my justification. The next video I'm going to analyze the January 6th, and then also I want to analyze Trump's handling of the Michael Forrest Reinell case, which is very interesting. That comes right in the shadow of the Kenosha Kyle Rittenhouse case. Okay, and Michael Reinell killed Aaron Danielson, another kind of protest. These guys are all like in the protest, like Kyle Rittenhouse, Aaron Danielson, Michael Reinell. These are all people that were kind of involved in like informal, citizen security around all these protests in Kenosha and Portland. So I want to talk about those things because there's a lot of dialectical material in these events, these current events, where we can sort of get into the area where I think people with personality disorders have a lot of limited functioning. Okay, so it's very healthy to get these issues out, talk about them, and to have these deep conversations that are exercising maybe the part of the soul that is kind of under exercised in the personality disorder. So so I'm going to put out a couple of videos today where I talk about those issues. So yeah, thanks for watching. And there's a reason why I talk about politics. It's not for nothing. It's not. It is, I think, somewhat related, and I think we should challenge ourselves to see the connection, because politics is a dialectical space. Okay, so when we talk about politics, we need to ask ourselves, besides what goes on in the public, how can we bring that dialectical processing into ourselves, okay, so that we are burdened down and we feel weighed down and burdened by the issues, considerations, and all the incompatible, dissonant ideas that are in our environment. Okay, so how can we bring that environmental taxation into ourselves? Okay, so we should think about that as we talk about big issues in our political world. Okay, so thanks for watching, and really appreciate wishing everybody the best. Okay, thanks.